What's up? Welcome back to the series where I go through the factions that you can play at Warhammer 40k, tell you a bit about their lore, how they play on tabletop, make a few jokes, so on, so on. My name's Glueboy, and today we're going to talk about another faction I love. This faction in particular I've been playing since I got into Warhammer. The first boxes I picked up were these guys. This is going to be the Adeptus Custodes.
All I am surrounded by is fear and dead men.
The Adeptus Custodes are the Emperor's first and greatest attempts at his genetic creations. Alongside the Thunder Warriors, the Primarchs, the Space Marines later, Custodes are like them, maybe not the Primarchs, them but a little better. As in, to make a Space Marine, you have to take a person around time before they've fully gone through puberty, and you just start shoving in new organs into them. Some fun genetic enhancements, all that good stuff. You start throwing it in there, and if they survive, they pass the test and they can go on to be a Space Marine. It's different for a Custodian. From birth, they are genetically altered, from birth. And as such, each Custodian is individually crafted, a lot of the times by the Emperor himself, when he was still up and kicking and not rotting away on his little throne. As such, making a Custodian is stupid hard and stupid expensive. So there's not many. One of the other names for the Custodes is the army of 10,000, because it is purported that their numbers have never reached higher than 10,000 soldiers, which I gotta say, for Warhammer scaling, is stupid low. Endlessly, you'll see numbers of billions and trillions thrown out. That is these guys with 10,000. And to be honest, they don't need more. They're fine. Because the Custodes are stupid strong. The Custodes are perfect in nearly every way. They think faster, fight harder, fuck harder. All that. The stuff you need for a good fighting force. And they kind of need to be that, because the Custodian's primary job is to protect the Emperor of mankind and make sure nothing bad happens to him. And as you can tell, kind of fucked that up along the way, which is something they bear with great shame. Once the Emperor fell, they consigned themselves to sit inside of the Imperial Palace and protect it, not leave, and stay by the Emperor's side. And they stayed that way for a good long while, until Cadia fell. And the whole shebang I talked about last episode. After the fall of Cadia, the Custodians, strictly a guy named Trajan Valoris, which I'll get into later, pulled a kind of a Mark Wahlberg, and if I was there, it would have gone a little different. Later on, Robot Gorilla Man got revived by this whole Roland crew, and with that, took away the old law that Custodians have to stay on Earth and not leave the galaxy. Now that the Custodes are allowed to travel the galaxy, doing their job outside of Terra, they're going around with Guilliman and his whole gang on the Indominus Crusade, killing the enemies of mankind, and generally putting the work in. Because a Custodian, for example, one dude can solo a whole lot of enemies. It's ridiculous how powerful they are. They tussle with a lot of enemies, a lot of them winning every time, except for Harlequins, which I'm not going to get into because I'm an Imperium fanboy and I refuse to acknowledge they won. But we can at least talk about the leader of this whole roving band of just golden death machines. A guy by the name of Taurus is the current Captain General of the Adeptus Custodes. Now, for the Custodes are very individualistic with how they fight, as in usually one Custodian is fine to deal with a threat, and they're really good at fighting one-on-one, as they have their Guardian Spears, or Castellan Axes, Sentinel Blades, all of which have guns built into these weaponaries. So there's lots of cool moments in the books where they're swinging with their spear and on the backswing shooting a guy in the head that's right behind them. A lot of cool stuff like that. They're really good just by themselves. And as such, there's not really a military hierarchy for there would be for Space Marines or just the regular military forces. The positions of Shield Captain and Captain General are positions of honorary acknowledgement of how cool they are. Captain General is a little different, as he is considered the peak of Custodians, to the point where he wields the authority of the Emperor himself and is honored to be the key person to guard the Emperor. And right now, it's Trajan Valoris. which he is ridiculously strong and ridiculously powerful with just his whole shit. The custodians do a thing called the Blood Games, where one custodian infiltrates the Imperial Palace, which, by the way, is the size of a small nation, stupid big, and attempts to get to the Emperor's throne room to do a mock assassination. And that every other custodian needs to stop this person. They do this a lot, and normally, a lot of them have failures, as the security in the Imperial Palace is pretty good. And there's also a way to test the security to see if there's anything they need to patch. Trajan Valoris won it twice. Unheard of. He's that cool. As well, he has some really fun weapons, like the Watcher's Axe, which is like a Castellan axe, but better. Now, custodian weaponry, especially back in the day, was handcrafted by the Emperor himself and gifted to the custodian. And when all your weapons are mastercrafted, it's hard to get more mastercrafted, yet he found a way. And gifted this axe that is wielded by many other captain generals before him. He uses it to great effect. He can cut a Hellbrute in half, which is insane. And he wields a fun little Dark Age of Humanity piece of tech called the Moment Shackle, which is really fun on the tabletop. And it does. The Moment Shackle allows Valoris to trap fragments of temporal energy and turn them to his use, excising split-second events from history or slowing the localized temporal flow enough to tip a desperate fight in his favor. Now, what this means is, especially on the tabletop, say he's about to deal a mortal blow. He messes with time a little bit so he can perfectly sidestep. He can get an extra attack in as he does his full swing, and then suddenly you're being hit again and you saw no movement. Goofy stuff like that. And like I mentioned before in previous videos, Dark Age technology is cracked and they don't give it out lightly. And he uses great effect. It's real fun on the tabletop. Like, you will use this. It's a once per game thing, but you will use it. Which, speaking of those rules, we're going to go right to that.
Come back here. Come here. I'm going to kick your ass.
No.
I'm going to kick it harder if you don't come over here.
When getting into custodians, the first thing that it's really going to be for you is the idea of consistency. So custodians, when they're attacking, hit on 2s, which for those of you who don't fully understand how that works, to make an attack, you roll a d6, and if they need to get a 2 or higher to hit. Space Marines, they hit on 3s. Regular humans hit on 4s. And you're going to be hitting a lot, and depending on how you position your units, you're going to get a lot of rerolls if you roll a 1. So you're going to be outputting hits constantly. And with how strong the weapons are, you're going to be wounding really consistently as well. You have a 2-up armor save and a 4-up invul save. So if you're being attacked and there's armor penetration, you save all of your attacks on 4s. So I hope you're good at winning coin flips. Because if you can make all those coin flips, you're unkillable. Which sadly is a bit of how they perform. If you can't make that 4-up, and you're just consistently failing it, you're going to get squashed because you don't have that many models on the field. You can easily get outnumbered stupidly fast against every other faction. So every model loss hurts hard. So I hope you make those 4-ups. As well, a pretty solid disclaimer I have to make for Custodes. All of the shit in the book, it's not right. Because Custodians had a 65% win rate last season, which is stupidly high. They were on top for every single tournament. So as such, they've been hit with nerf after nerf. A lot of your stratagems are 1-game use. They took away OBSEC for all of your infantry, and the Wardens are now completely useless. A fact of which I cry myself to sleep at night at least once a week. Just double check with Wapedia, make sure that your rules are right, because a lot of them just don't work the way in the book. And I understand Custodes needed a nerf, but I'm still real upset that they hurt my favorite golden boys the way they did. I felt like they could have done it a little better, but still, they're solid. I'd say they're really easy to get into. They're an army I'd recommend starting with. So don't let that deter you. Just know that they once used to be on top, and now they're middle of the board. Just middle of it. But if you're going to be playing Custodes, you got to pick a shield host, which we'll get into right now. Down the list of shield hosts, the first one in the book is the Emperor's Chosen. Now, the Emperor's Chosen It's a weird misnomer that they're shield hosts because they're technically not really. Because shield hosts are basically just a group of custodians who kind of do the same thing, kind of just working together. They're not actually like a conscribed military fighting force. They're just a thing you can do if you really want to. So the Emperor's Chosen, they're not in a shield host. So they're just all-arounders. And as such, they get a lot of like flexibility in how they play. For their fighting style, you get to reroll 1 hit roll, 1 wound roll per attack made by a unit. And you get a 4-up Feel No Pain against mortals, which is really helpful because psychic stuff is a real weakness for Custodes. I'm not bringing up Sisters. They're a way to mitigate that. I'm not bringing up Sisters of Silence. I'll do that in a separate video. I gotta milk all the factions as I can. And for their specific stratagem, once per game at the beginning of your command phase, you can select another shield host fighting style that'll be active until the beginning of your next command phase. Once per game, but depending on the situation you're in, there's a lot of like maneuverability you can do. And I'll get into them later, but there's a few shield hosts that's honestly a pretty good pick. And from my understanding, Emperor's Chosen are pretty basic meta pick. They're really solid. They're not my favorite. I have a favorite, which I'll get into like literally in a few, but they're not my favorite. I think they're kind of just basic and they're just the basic golden boys. But I'll get into my favorite one, the Shadow Keepers. Now, the Shadow Keepers, imagine if the SCP Foundation existed in Warhammer, and that's these guys. But then also imagine they're like the SCP Foundation, but if something breaks out, they can just beat its ass. Like you got Cthulhu under lock and key. He breaks out, starts giving his monologue, and a bunch of custodians in black clad armor, golden trim, just start kicking its ass, throwing it back in the jail cell. Love them. Underneath Terra, there's a bunch of just horrible monsters and ancient tech just under lock and key that needs protecting, so they got out. Shit gets fucked real fast. That's their job. For their fighting style, any enemies that are attacking them get a -1 to their attack characteristic, which, solid, you're getting less attacks in, means you're taking less damage on average. Make sure you remind your opponent of this. They will forget. Just bring that up, be annoying about it. As well, you get to reroll wounds into any character unit. And depending on the person you're fighting, how many characters they're bringing, you can just be the character annihilator. Kill all of them because like you're not missing a wound roll with that. It's real handy. And for their unique stratagem, you get to lower the strength of an incoming attack by 1. Situational, there's not many opportunities where a single strength difference is going to change the likelihood of you being wounded. But when it does, it's helpful. Extra tankiness for Custodes is always a great thing to use. Next up is the Dread Host, the terror force of the Custodes. They embody the rage and anger of the Emperor, the wrath towards the enemies of mankind, and they dish out the holy vengeance of the Emperor. And a fun thing, their ship, forgive me if I mispronounce this, I don't know how you say this, the Moriades, in their flagship, they have a teleportation hallway. So when they teleport on battlefield in a giant flash of light, they're in a full sprint coming right at you. Which, honestly, getting charged down by 9-foot demigods, terrifying. That's a reason to be scared. For their fighting style, they get +1 AP when attacking an enemy that is at least 9 inches from them. Extra AP is always handy. That's more likely to get more hits in. And if they don't have an invul, more likely to get to the point where, they just can't really save against your attacks. As well, you get to reroll your charge rolls, which, to be honest, the amount of games I've had where I've had a character or unit stand there, just unable to get into combat, I wish I could just have a free reroll. Can't have it all the time. Too many games where one of my commanders just sits there, awkwardly doing nothing from 4 inches away. It's like roll the 3 twice. Real annoying. And for their unique stratagem, when deep striking in, you spend 2 CP and you spend 2 CP. Anyone attacking your unit will get -1 to hit for that turn. And as well, the unit that's being charged cannot set to defend or fire Overwatch. which honestly, use that into salamanders if you're playing against them. Their Overwatch hurts real bad. Next up, we have the Aquilin Shield. The Aquilin Shield dedicate themselves to protecting people in the Imperium that are deemed important. They will get some weird foresight of who will be important for the future of the Imperium and just in general, and they will protect them, either very obviously appearing in a flash of light and defending this random person in a moment of battle, or from the shadows. Fun fact, High Marshal Helbrecht of the Black Templars was actually protected by a squad of Aquilin Shields until he was eventually picked up by the Black Templars recruitment ships. Fun detail, I found that in the Codex, so that was really fun. But their fighting style, all of your units can heroically intervene. Real handy, someone makes a charge, you have more likelihood of just getting more units into combat, making that charge a real bad idea, or just preventing charges because making their charge a really poor decision. And as well, when someone's hitting you with a -1 AP weapon, you reduce it to 0. Means, I'd rather make armor saves on a 2-up than a 3-up. Just more likelihood of not getting hit. As well, for your unique stratagem for 1 CP, you can make it so an Imperium character cannot be shot if they're within 6 inches of a core unit for the Aquilin Shields. Just handy if you're not positioning things out or you have to position things a certain way. I don't see it coming up crazy often, but it's nice when you need it. Next, we got the Solar Watch, a quick-moving strike force that parks themselves right in the Sol system, attacking any enemies that try to get into our little sector. And they love their jet bikes. Love jet bikes. Quick moving, they get a lot of buffs just to moving fast, moving good. Which, sadly, the jet bikes are kind of shit right now. So, yeah. Real sad about that one, too. So, for your fighting style, you get +1 to advance and charge. Real handy, makes a lot of those charges and advances a lot more consistent. And you can also charge and fall back, which those bike units, they get some extra wounds when they charge in, so just keep charging every turn. Get some fun little bonuses for that. For the unique stratagem, when you kill the enemy warlord, you can make so each time the opponent makes a combat attrition test, they -1 from the check. And to be honest, there's so many ways to get around the morale phase for any army. I don't see this coming up. I haven't had combat attrition make a real difference in any of my games. Anytime that combat attrition would matter, I've killed the whole unit. So just kill them better, I guess. Who needs the morale phase? Just kill them. For the last shield host, we have the Emissaries Imperiatus. The name kind of implies it, but they're emissaries of the Emperor. Back in the good old days of the Great Crusade and such, they acted as like the word of the Emperor. They were his personal messengers and diplomats. And they're damn good at it. And as such, like many things in the Custodes, they act with almost like the respect and the will of the Emperor himself. When they make a declaration, you gotta respect that shit. For their fighting style, you get to fight first for all your units. And it's important to mention, you do not actually fight before everyone else. You are put in the fight first bracket, which basically means you get a bunch of free interrupts. Real handy, don't make that mistake. You're put same in the charge bracket for your opponent's attacks coming in. And as well, you ignore all modifiers to your hit and wound rolls. Any pesky -1 to wounds or -1 to hit, you just ignore. Real handy. And for their stratagem, this one will cost either 2 or 3 CP. Before your first turn, you get a pregame move. I had a real goofy list that worked really well in one local tournament I took them to, where I just brought a fuck ton of jet bikes before they got nerfed to the ground. Pregame move them 14 inches up the board, move them my first turn 14 inches up the board, mess up the enemy backline really well. Very, very handy thing. Really, really handy just rules. I just don't know how dependable it is right now. Just look into it. If you're playing something that's a bit more casual, I'd highly recommend this list. It's stupid fun. Only problem, gotta buy a bunch of jet bikes. Come 3 in a box, and honestly, they're really annoying to build, but that's just me. When it comes to list building, first thing I'm really gonna recommend, bring Trajan. His stats are stupid. He is really good to bring along. I don't see much reason to not include him into your list. There's another unique character for Custodians, Valerian. I didn't really talk about him much because I haven't read his books yet. I'm not planning on spoiling myself for it, so sorry, not sorry. And even then, his rules are fine. If you have to pick between a unique custodian character, bring Trajan. He's stupid strong. Reroll once to like hit and wound his moment shackle. Getting extra CP just for bringing him. You're spending all the CP you need to make your characters stupid strong. You need that 1 CP real bad. And got some bad news for you if you're trying to play this army competitively. Have fun looking at the Forge World site constantly, because if you want your list to be real good, have fun working with these resin kits. Absolute ass to make. I hate resin with a passion. But these models, stupid good. Also stupid expensive. So have fun with that. That Ares grav tank, want one. Wasn't so fucking expensive. Buy those dreadnoughts, by the way. The Telamon, the Achilles, and the Gladys are stupid good. I love my Achilles. He's real handy. At the local store I'm at, I've often heard people warn players about my Achilles Dreadnought. He touches the thing, it's probably going to be dead. It's a real fun unit. And I honestly, one last con, which it's depending on your tastes and just your own creativity when it comes to the modeling side. A lot of the Custodes parts kind of get a little samey, because you're making, depending on how infantry heavy or how just unit heavy your list is going to be, eventually you start seeing some repeat poses. If you want to fix this, just learn how to use green stuff, or something I did, it's a pretty good effect, is just kit bash with the Stormcast Eternals from Age of Sigmar. There's a lot of crossover as the 2 Golden Warrior factions. There's some really fun poses for the Stormcast Eternals that you can just swap out some parts for. I did it for my Trajan Valoris and Bastalion Karthos, I think it's his name. I did a cool pose swap for that. Real happy with my work. But other than that, with all of those warnings of Custodes out of the way, I still do recommend them greatly. I think they're an army that's incredibly easy to play, as they're really simple. They're just not top performing right now. I don't really like the mindset of you have to play the top performing thing. Play what you find fun. If the Custodes seem interesting to you, pick up a box or 2, paint them up. They're real easy. They're real stupid fun. 500 points for these guys is 8 models. So that's nothing compared to the rest of the whole game. Yeah, that's a lot. But that about wraps it up for this video. Play the Custodes, read some of their books. There's a few really good ones, names of which are peering up behind me. I've read some of these. I recommend especially this one right here. This one's real good. Not Custodian main character, but a prominent Custodes character is in it. And I love that man. He's great. But that about wraps it up. Like, subscribe, do whatever. And I'll come at you next week with another faction video. See ya.